Good evening. It is good to be with you. We are living through one of the most dangerous moments in human history, though most people do not feel it yet. When they open their newspapers or scroll through their social media feeds, they see only surface noise. They see politicians bickering endlessly. They see inflation statistics rise and fall. They see the spectacle of an election cycle that increasingly resembles reality television rather than the governance of a global hegemon. What they do not see are the deeper structural forces grinding beneath the floorboards of the American empire. And if you look there, what you find is far more disturbing. You find a superpower tearing itself apart from within at the precise moment its external rivals are gathering strength and patience. To understand the danger of this moment, it helps to focus on something that appears trivial at first glance, but captures the essence of America's decline in the 21st century. It comes from Donald Trump, a man viewed by his supporters as a savior and by his critics as a wrecking ball. Speaking in Pennsylvania, a state that has become a political bellwether and a proxy battlefield for America's future, Trump offered advice on how Americans should cope with inflation. He did not propose a new industrial policy. He did not outline reforms to global trade or energy markets. He simply told people they did not need to spend $37 on a Christmas gift for their child. $2 or $3, he suggested, was enough. There is something darkly absurd about this moment. Here is a man who has lived his entire life in luxury, who represents a political movement built on the promise of prosperity, telling citizens of the richest nation in history to accept their decline quietly and adjust their expectations downward. This was not merely a gaffe, it was an admission. It signaled to rivals abroad that the American consumer, the engine that powered global growth and underwrote American military dominance for decades, is faltering. When the American consumer breaks, the political consensus breaks with it, and when that consensus fractures, instability follows. A divided America is not a peaceful America. A weak America is not a restrained America. It is a cornered power, prone to miscalculation and overreaction. History shows that declining powers are often the most dangerous, not because they are confident, but because they are afraid. They lash out not from strength, but from insecurity. The signs of internal decay are everywhere. One of the clearest is the mass exodus from the governing class itself. When you look at the House of Representatives today, you do not see a party preparing to govern. You see panic. You see members announcing early retirements, resignations, and exits from public life. Figures who once thrived in chaos now refuse to serve in the minority. This is not normal behavior for a confident political movement. Parties that believe history is on their side do not flee the battlefield. They entrench, they organize, they fight. In realist terms, what we are witnessing is a collapse of institutional cohesion. Legitimacy is draining away. This is not merely about electoral defeat, it is about the erosion of faith in the system itself. Polling data reflects this collapse. A vast majority of Americans report that grocery prices have risen sharply. Many say they are struggling to meet basic needs. When people can't afford food or modest comforts, democracy becomes brittle. Social contracts fray. Politics turns volatile. History offers a brutal lesson here. When great powers face deep domestic crises, when elites are divided and the population is angry, the temptation to seek solutions abroad becomes overwhelming. War distracts. War rallies national identity. War suppresses dissent. It offers meaning where domestic politics offers only frustration. That is why this moment is so dangerous. The United States is not drifting toward conflict because it is strong. It is drifting toward conflict because it is weak. As the economy teeters and governance gridlocks, the risk of confrontation with Russia, China, or Iran rises dramatically. These conflicts may not begin intentionally. They may begin through miscalculation, escalation, or the need to appear resolute in the face of perceived decline. Domestically, the political landscape is shifting rapidly.
The Democratic Party, sensing opportunity, is mobilizing effectively. It is winning elections in districts that once seemed safely out of reach. This suggests widespread rejection of chaos and exhaustion with perpetual crisis. But this should not be mistaken for a return to stability. A unified government does not guarantee prudent leadership. In fact, history suggests the opposite. When one party controls both Congress and the presidency, it often interprets victory as a mandate for expansion rather than restraint. If Democrats consolidate power, they are likely to reassert American global leadership aggressively. Ukraine, Taiwan, and the Middle East will be framed not as risks to manage, but as tests of credibility. Electoral success will be interpreted as permission to act abroad, not as a plea to rebuild at home. This is the central tragedy of American politics. Voters want affordability and security. Elites respond with geopolitics and war. Donald Trump, meanwhile, remains trapped by his own contradictions. He understands power intuitively, but lacks the discipline to apply it strategically. His responses to economic stress, denial, deflection, and blame reveal a leader disconnected from everyday reality. As pressure mounts, his rhetoric becomes more extreme. A flailing leader is a dangerous leader, especially in a nuclear-armed state. This confusion is reflected in the broader conservative movement, embodied in figures who shift identities and beliefs with the political winds. Moral frameworks dissolve under the pressure of mobilization. Ethics become liabilities. Resentment becomes currency. Institutions that once mediated between morality and power lose influence. The state hardens. Borders close. Compassion recedes. These are classic symptoms of a declining power retreating inward, fearful of competition it no longer believes it can win. From abroad, this dysfunction is impossible to miss. In Moscow, American paralysis is not lamented, it is analyzed. Russian leadership watches congressional dysfunction, recruitment shortfalls, inflation, and political division, and concludes that time favors them. Sustained pressure will outlast American patience. Every domestic argument over foreign aid reinforces this calculation. Beijing is watching even more carefully. China views America's affordability crisis as evidence of systemic failure. Political instability, legal warfare between factions, and the erosion of trust signal exhaustion. From this perspective, the question is not whether America retains power, but how long it can sustain commitments far from its shores. If China believes the United States is distracted, divided, and economically constrained, the temptation to act increases. And if America responds to such a move out of fear rather than strategy, the results could be catastrophic. The danger lies in miscalculation on both sides. If rivals act believing America is finished, and American elites respond believing credibility demands confrontation, escalation becomes likely. The human cost would be immense. Ordinary Americans, already struggling economically, would bear the burden in blood and treasure. You cannot maintain an empire when your citizens cannot afford basic stability. That violates the social contract at the core of political legitimacy. Analysts and experts warn of danger, but too often focus on elections rather than foundations. Leadership changes mean little if structural decline continues unchecked. The United States is entering a period of domestic anarchy layered atop international competition. Law becomes a political weapon, institutions lose neutrality, trust erodes. Civil conflict remains cold, but history suggests such conditions rarely remain contained, they spill outward. Militarily, the warning signs are stark. Industrial capacity lags demand, recruitment struggles persist, strategic commitments multiply even as resources shrink. This is overstretch in its purest form, the same error that doomed empires before. The underlying disease is hubris. the belief that America is exempt from history's laws, that it can borrow endlessly, intervene endlessly, and avoid consequences. But consequences are arriving from every direction: a rising China, a resilient Russia, a global system slowly diversifying away from American dominance, and a domestic population increasingly exhausted. When Americans are told to buy less, it reflects a deeper truth. The country will have less influence, less wealth, less margin for error. The choice ahead is stark: manage decline with restraint and realism, or deny it and lash out destructively. The foreign policy establishment resists decline instinctively. It equates restraint with weakness. It urges escalation to preserve credibility. But credibility built on denial is fragile. Combined with domestic desperation, it is explosive. We are drifting toward a storm. Whether the nation survives it will not depend on consumer choices or campaign slogans. It will depend on whether leaders can confront reality honestly and rebuild internal strength before reaching for external enemies. At present, there is little evidence of such prudence. What dominates instead is ambition, fear, and folly. Realism demands looking into the abyss, not out of pessimism, but out of necessity. A wounded giant is still powerful, but it is also dangerous to itself and to others. The future will be decided not by speeches, but whether the United States can resolve its internal contradictions before they resolve it.